Today, we're taking a close look at the architecture of truth in corporate forensics. We're going to dismantle the illusion of certainty and examine exactly how raw data is transformed into defensible findings.
So, your evidence looks incredibly convincing. The spreadsheet balances perfectly, the timestamps align, you've even got 3 different AI systems reaching the exact same conclusion, and your presentation is absolutely flawless. Well, that is exactly when you need to step back and challenge it. Did independent evidence actually converge, or did several different tools just repeat the exact same error in different voices? You see, agreement can be manufactured, and in corporate investigations, our inherent trust in that agreement is a massive vulnerability.
To really understand this, let's look at a catastrophic engineering failure. Back in 1999, NASA lost the Mars Climate Orbiter. What happened was the ground software produced data using English units, but the onboard system was expecting metric units. Now, the numbers existed, and the calculations were highly precise, but the interface between them was completely wrong. This wasn't fraud, it was a structural breakdown. 2 technically correct systems produced a catastrophic conclusion simply because nobody verified that they actually meant the same thing.
And that brings us to the central evidentiary problem we're dealing with here. Precision is not proof. Before you even ask whether 2 numbers match, you first have to establish whether they are even comparable. Agreement between systems can be disastrous if they both inherit the same contaminated source, the same incorrect timestamp, or the same fundamentally flawed premise.
That leads us into the verified protocol, which focuses on moving from raw signals to defensible findings.
Now, the verified protocol isn't some infallible truth machine. It's actually an adversarial architecture designed to expose your evidence to resistance. It's a framework built specifically for corporate investigations, internal audits, and AI-assisted analytical work, and it moves an investigation through 8 distinct stages. The overarching goal here isn't to create artificial certainty. It's to build tested confidence with clearly documented limitations. Because the strength of your investigation isn't measured by how coherent the narrative sounds, it's measured by what remains standing after an informed person actively tries to break it. Let's break down these phases.
We start with Phase 1, securing the artifacts. This is all about preserving before interpreting.
The moment you open a file, your standard tools might subtly change it. A spreadsheet updates its properties, or a cloud platform creates a new version right under your nose. True preservation protects the native artifact. You have to vault the originals, calculate integrity hashes, and restrict access. You want to ensure your analysis is done solely on clearly identified working copies. Only then do we start examining provenance. Remember, a machine-generated record is still just a claim. Consider the 5-layer log validation test. Take the 2012 Knight Capital case, where a software deployment error ended up costing the firm over $460 million. Internal systems actually generated 97 automated emails connected to that error before the market even opened. The records existed, but the SEC found the firm lacked an effective process for interpreting them. The system essentially warned them, but the governance surrounding those records completely failed.
We also have to rigorously reconcile identity, authority, and time. Crucially, there's a strict difference between what evidence can establish and what it cannot. For instance, an IP address identifies a network origin. It doesn't identify the physical human sitting at the keyboard. A contemporaneous email stating that a director approved a payment by phone establishes that a reported approval occurred. It does not automatically confirm the physical person operating that account, nor does it confirm the actual authenticated content of that conversation.
Next up is Phase 2, forcing friction. This is where we focus on testing patterns and demanding dissent.
Look, a credible investigation doesn't ask its evidence to agree smoothly. It forces cross-domain disagreement. You literally have to demand that your evidence argues with itself. When you find a recurring discrepancy, you apply a 6-stage pattern test. Keep in mind, one single discrepancy opens a question, but a recurring pattern demands serious scrutiny. However, a pattern is not a verdict. You still have to subject it to an exception stress test. You search for the month that breaks the pattern or the transaction moving in the exact opposite direction. A serious investigator never hides the exception. They put it right at the center of the analysis.
We also need to structurally investigate with dissent using a 4-layer architecture. Think about systemic cases, like the 2008 SEC enforcement action against Siemens, which involved off-books accounts and intermediaries. For that, structural analysis is absolutely required. Agreement is cheap if every reviewer is just sharing the exact same mistake. You need source grounding, deterministic calculation, adversarial review, and finally, human adjudication. AI does not vote on truth. Human reviewers have to determine what those findings actually mean.
Now we move to Phase 3, calibrating the conclusion, which covers the 5 levels of evidentiary escalation.
Finding a pattern doesn't suddenly make you the prosecutor. A professional report explicitly separates findings so the investigator doesn't inappropriately cross over into a legal role. This begins with Level 1, the observed artifact. This is totally foundational. You are simply acknowledging what observable artifact exists within a file, without making any assumptions about its broader meaning. Saying, the file contains a transaction dated 14 March, that is a pure observation.
Moving up to Level 2, we have the validated technical fact. This is where independent corroboration elevates that raw artifact. By comparing the preserved export to an independent bank record that shows a corresponding amount and date, you have successfully validated the technical reality of that event.
Level 3 allows for a supported inference. Because you have independent records converging, you can responsibly infer that the transaction occurred within the identified period. Notice how the analytical leap here is documented, carefully controlled, and directly tied to the validated facts.
Then there's Level 4, the unresolved hypotheses. And honestly, this one is absolutely essential for maintaining real evidentiary discipline. You have to clearly state what the evidence does not establish. Acknowledging that you can't prove why a transaction was classified differently is a mark of rigorous investigation, not a weakness.
And finally, Level 5, the legal determination. Whether the conduct constitutes fraud, tax evasion, or a breach of duty, that is strictly reserved for authorized decision-makers. As an investigator, your job is to identify and test. A court or competent authority makes the determination of legal responsibility. This entire calibration process dictates your language. You have to replace weak accusatory language with truly defensible terms. Avoid claiming that a pattern proves intentional fraud. Instead, state something like recurring cross-domain discrepancies justify deeper review. You need meticulously calibrated language that can actually survive a legal challenge.
Finally, we reach Phase 4, demonstrating structural recovery. This is where remediation must be proven, not just announced. Firing one person or publishing a shiny new policy is not evidence of operational effectiveness. To see this in action, look at the Wells Fargo timeline. It perfectly demonstrates true structural recovery. In 2018, the Federal Reserve required Wells Fargo to improve their governance. But it wasn't until 2025 that asset growth restrictions were removed, and 2026 when the enforcement action was finally terminated. A public relations response takes a few days. Demonstrating true structural recovery, backed by cold, hard evidence of effectiveness, can take nearly a decade.
So, before you release any investigative conclusion, you need to apply this final test. Here are 3 practical actions you absolutely must take. First, ensure independent domains were genuinely forced to disagree. Second, confirm that someone intentionally attempted to disprove your working theory. And third, verify that your language strictly separates observable evidence from analytical inference.
Ultimately, a credible investigation moves from a raw signal to a state of tested confidence. Your evidence is not defensible just because your tools, your team, or your AI all happen to agree with it. It only becomes defensible when it is tested against serious resistance. So take a hard look at your own analytical architecture right now and ask yourself, would your current investigation survive informed disagreement?
Semvanski Labs and Research. Forensics over fiction.